I went to my sister's wedding, but when I arrived, my chair was removed from the family table. What I discovered next about why I was excluded will shock you. I stood in the parking lot of Rosewood Manor, smoothing down my emerald green dress that had cost me 2 weeks' salary. My hands trembled as I checked my reflection in the car window one final time. Today was Sarah's wedding day, and I'd driven 3 hours to be here for my only sister's most important moment. The morning had started perfectly. I'd woken up early, spent 2 hours getting my hair and makeup done at the salon Sarah recommended. My grandmother's pearl necklace sparkled against my collarbone, the same jewelry Sarah had always admired. Everything felt magical, just like the fairy tale wedding she'd always dreamed about since childhood. For 8 months, I'd helped plan every detail of this wedding. From addressing hundreds of invitations by hand to attending cake tastings and flower arrangements, I'd been Sarah's constant support.
We'd spent countless weekends shopping for decorations, comparing venues, and discussing her vision for the perfect ceremony that would mark her new beginning with Michael.
Sarah had called me just yesterday, bubbling with excitement about the final preparations. "Emma, everything's going to be absolutely perfect," she'd said, her voice musical with joy. "You're going to love your spot at the family table. I can't wait for you to see how beautiful everything looks." Those words had filled me with such happiness. Being included at the family table felt like recognition of my importance in Sarah's life. After our parents' divorce when we were teenagers, Sarah and I had grown incredibly close, supporting each other through difficult times and celebrating every milestone together throughout our adult lives. I'd taken 2 vacation days from work I couldn't really afford to lose, but family always came first in my priorities. My car trunk was packed with carefully wrapped wedding gifts, including the antique jewelry box I'd inherited from our grandmother. I'd saved it specifically for Sarah's wedding day, knowing how much she'd treasure this family heirloom. The venue took my breath away. Rosewood Manor was a historic estate with ivy-covered walls and sprawling gardens filled with white roses. Elegant string quartet music drifted across the manicured lawns, where guests in designer outfits mingled with champagne glasses, creating the sophisticated atmosphere Sarah had always envisioned for her special day. I spotted my cousins near the main entrance, laughing and posing for photos in their expensive designer dresses and professional makeup. My stomach tightened slightly, seeing their polished appearances, but I pushed away any feelings of inadequacy. Today wasn't about comparing ourselves. It was about celebrating Sarah's happiness and supporting her as she began this new chapter. The ceremony was absolutely breathtaking. Sarah looked radiant in her flowing white gown, with intricate lace details and a cathedral-length veil. Even Michael, who'd always seemed somewhat cold toward our family, appeared genuinely moved as they exchanged heartfelt vows beneath the rose-covered archway that Sarah had spent months planning and designing with the wedding coordinator. I wiped away tears of pure joy watching my sister promise to love and cherish Michael for the rest of their lives. This was the moment she'd dreamed about since we were little girls playing dress-up in our mother's wedding dress. Seeing her dreams come true filled my heart with overwhelming happiness and pride for the woman she'd become. After the beautiful ceremony, guests began moving toward the elegant reception hall for dinner and dancing. My heart swelled with pride watching Sarah gracefully greet everyone, her smile radiant and genuine. This was the sister I'd grown up with, the one who'd shared secrets and dreams with me through all the years of our sisterhood. I approached the family table with excitement, scanning for my name card among the elegant place settings adorned with gold-rimmed china and crystal glasses. My parents sat proudly at the head of the table, my aunts and uncles positioned along the sides, while various cousins filled the remaining spots around the beautifully decorated table centerpiece. But something was terribly wrong. I circled the table twice, my heart beginning to race with confusion and growing panic. The table seated exactly 12 people, and there were precisely 12 place cards arranged around the elegant centerpiece, but absolutely none of them bore my name anywhere to be found. My hands began shaking as the horrible realization slowly dawned on me like ice water in my veins. My chair, my place setting, my entire spot at the family table had been completely removed. I wasn't just moved to a different seat. I'd been entirely excluded from sitting with my own family at my sister's wedding reception. Desperately hoping there'd been some innocent mistake with the seating arrangements, I checked the adjacent tables throughout the reception hall. Table 2 held Sarah's college sorority sisters. Table 3, her work colleagues from the marketing firm. Table 4, distant relatives I barely knew from Michael's extended family. But still, no place card anywhere with my name. I approached my mother with trembling hands, trying to keep my voice steady, despite the panic rising in my throat. "Mom," I whispered urgently, "I can't find my seat anywhere. Where am I supposed to sit for dinner?" Her face flushed red, and she glanced nervously toward Sarah, clearly uncomfortable with my question. "Oh, honey," Mom stammered, avoiding my eyes completely. "There was a last-minute change with the seating arrangements. Sarah will explain everything to you later." Last-minute change? I'd helped plan this wedding for 8 months, been part of every decision, every detail, every conversation about guest lists and arrangements. Sarah appeared beside me suddenly, radiant in her wedding dress, but with a strange coldness in her eyes I'd never seen before. "Emma, you look beautiful," she said, but her voice lacked its usual warmth. There was something calculated about her smile that sent chills down my spine, making me feel like a stranger. "Sarah, I can't find my seat," I said, forcing a smile despite the growing pit in my stomach. "Mom mentioned a last-minute change, but I'm confused about where I'm supposed to sit for the reception dinner." My voice cracked slightly as I tried to maintain composure in front of the other guests. Sarah's smile faltered for just a moment before returning with renewed brightness that felt completely fake. "Oh, that. Well, Michael's family needed more space at the main tables, and we had to make some adjustments. You understand, right? It's just logistics, nothing personal at all. Just logistics." Those words hit like daggers. But where am I sitting? I pressed, my voice barely above a whisper, as family members took their seats at the beautifully decorated family table. Everyone was chatting and laughing as if nothing unusual was happening, completely oblivious to my humiliation and the cruel exclusion I was experiencing right in front of them. Sarah glanced around nervously before pointing toward a small table in the far corner of the reception hall near the kitchen entrance. "Over there," she said quickly. "You're with some family friends. They're lovely people, and I'm sure you'll have a wonderful time with them tonight." Her dismissive tone was ice cold. I followed her gesture and saw a tiny table clearly added as an afterthought to accommodate overflow guests. Two elderly couples I'd never met sat there, looking equally confused about the seating arrangement. The table was positioned near the service entrance where waitstaff would constantly pass by with dirty dishes and empty glasses. The corner table was so far from the main action that I could barely see the head table where Sarah and Michael would be seated. It felt like being banished to Siberia, completely removed from the family celebration I'd helped plan. This wasn't just poor seating. This was deliberate exile from my own sister's wedding. "Sarah, I don't understand," I said, my voice cracking, despite my efforts to stay composed. "I'm your sister. I helped plan this entire wedding for months. Why am I being seated with strangers in the corner like some uninvited guest who crashed your party?" The hurt in my voice was impossible to hide. Her face hardened, and for a moment I saw a complete stranger looking back at me with cold indifference. "Emma, please don't make a scene on my wedding day. Just go sit down and enjoy the dinner. We can talk about this later, okay?" Her tone was dismissive, treating me like an annoying child. Make a scene? I was quietly asking my sister why I'd been excluded from the family table at her wedding reception. If wanting to understand why I'd been demoted to the corner constituted making a scene, then I didn't recognize this person wearing my sister's face anymore. This wasn't the Sarah I knew. Around us, guests were settling into their assigned seats. Wine being poured, conversations flowing naturally as the reception began. Everyone seemed to know exactly where they belonged except me. I felt like an unwelcome outsider at my own sister's wedding, invisible and unwanted despite months of devoted support and assistance. I walked slowly toward the corner table, my emerald dress suddenly feeling too bright, too expensive, too hopeful for this devastating moment. The elderly couple smiled politely as I approached, but their confusion about the bizarre seating arrangement was obvious from their bewildered expressions and whispered conversations about the strange placement. "I'm Emma, Sarah's sister." I introduced myself to the table, trying to sound normal despite the humiliation burning in my chest like acid. They seemed genuinely surprised that the bride's sister had been seated so far from the family, glancing toward the main table with questioning expressions and obvious discomfort. Throughout the elaborate dinner, I watched my family laughing and toasting at their prominent table, while I sat isolated in the corner like a punishment. Every time Sarah looked my way, she quickly averted her gaze, as if my presence reminded her of something uncomfortable she'd rather forget completely. The elderly couples were kind enough, sharing stories about their own children's weddings and trying to include me in polite conversation. But their well-meaning efforts couldn't mask the obvious awkwardness of the situation we'd all been placed in by Sarah's deliberate and cruel seating choices that defied all logic. I picked at my expensive salmon, barely tasting the gourmet meal I'd helped Sarah choose during our catering appointments months ago. My stomach was in knots, and every bite felt like swallowing stones. The beautiful venue felt like a prison, trapping me in this nightmare of public humiliation and family betrayal. During the toasts, Sarah's maid of honor spoke glowingly about their college friendship and shared intimate memories of their sisterhood. Michael's best man talked eloquently about their relationship and bright future together, but not once was I mentioned, despite being Sarah's only sister and closest family member for 28 years. When Michael's grandmother was acknowledged for traveling from across the country, when distant cousins were thanked for their presence, when college friends were celebrated for their loyalty, I remained invisible. The deliberate omission felt like being erased from Sarah's life history, as if our shared childhood and sisterhood had never existed. I excused myself from the table and walked to the restroom, needing a moment to collect myself before I completely broke down. In the mirror, I saw a woman in a beautiful dress who looked utterly defeated. My carefully applied makeup couldn't hide the pain in my eyes or the devastation written across my face. As I stood in the bathroom trying to compose myself, I overheard two of Sarah's college friends talking by the sinks. "Did you see where they seated her sister? That's so weird, right? I mean, she's family." The other friend lowered her voice. Sarah said she didn't want Emma ruining her perfect day somehow. Ruining her perfect day? What could I possibly have done to make Sarah think I would ruin her wedding? I'd been nothing but supportive, helpful, and loving throughout the entire planning process. I'd sacrificed time, money, and energy to make her dreams come true, and this was my reward for that devotion. I returned to my corner table, but the overheard conversation replayed in my mind like a broken record. Sarah didn't want me ruining her perfect day. But what had I done wrong? What terrible crime had I committed that warranted this public humiliation and exclusion from my own family's celebration? The dancing began, and I watched from my distant corner as Sarah glided across the floor with Michael, then with our father, then with various family members. Each dance felt like another reminder of my exclusion. Another moment where I was forgotten and left behind while life continued without me. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend, Jessica. "How's the wedding? Send pictures." I stared at the message, unable to respond. How could I explain that I'd been exiled to a corner table like an unwanted guest? How could I admit that my own sister had publicly humiliated me? As the evening wore on, several family members approached my table with confused expressions. "Emma, what are you doing over here?" my cousin Lisa asked. "Shouldn't you be at the family table?" I forced a smile and mumbled something about seating arrangements, too embarrassed to explain the truth about my sister's betrayal. Uncle Robert seemed particularly puzzled when he found me in the corner. "This doesn't seem right, Emma. You're Sarah's sister. Let me talk to your mother about getting this fixed." But before he could act, Sarah intercepted him, speaking quietly in his ear. His confused expression turned to understanding, then to pity. The pity in Uncle Robert's eyes was almost worse than the exclusion itself. Whatever Sarah had told him made him nod sympathetically and pat my shoulder before walking away. I was no longer just excluded. I was now the object of family pity, the embarrassing relative who needed to be managed and contained. By 10 o'clock, I couldn't take any more. The humiliation, the whispered conversations, the pitying glances from family members who clearly knew something I didn't, it was all too much. I needed to escape this nightmare before I completely fell apart in front of everyone and gave Sarah more ammunition against me. I gathered my purse and quietly left my corner table, slipping out through the service entrance near the kitchen to avoid any awkward goodbyes. The cool night air hit my face as I walked across the parking lot toward my car, my heels clicking on the pavement in the sudden silence. As I reached for my car door, I heard footsteps behind me. "Emma, wait!" It was my cousin Lisa, hurrying across the parking lot in her high heels. "Where are you going?" The reception isn't over yet. Her concerned expression made me want to cry even more than I already was. "I can't stay, Lisa," I said, my voice breaking as tears finally began to fall. "I don't understand what's happening, but Sarah clearly doesn't want me here. I'm just going to go home before I embarrass myself any further." The words tasted bitter, but they were honest and raw. Lisa's face softened with genuine sympathy. "Emma, this isn't right. You're her sister. Family is supposed to stick together, especially on important days like this. Something weird is going on, and Sarah owes you an explanation for treating you this way." Her validation meant everything in that moment of complete isolation. "Maybe she does, but I can't handle any more tonight," I replied, wiping my eyes with the back of my hand. "I need to go home and try to make sense of all this." "Can you tell my parents I wasn't feeling well? I don't want to cause any more drama." Lisa hugged me tightly. "This isn't your fault, Emma. Don't let Sarah make you think otherwise. Something is seriously wrong with how she's treating you tonight, and the whole family has noticed it. You deserve so much better than this kind of treatment from your own sister." I drove home in tears, my beautiful dress wrinkled, my makeup ruined, my heart completely shattered. The 3-hour drive gave me plenty of time to replay every moment of the evening, searching for clues about what I'd done wrong to deserve such cruel treatment from the sister I'd loved unconditionally. Back in my apartment, I sat on my couch, still wearing my wedding outfit, staring at my phone. Part of me wanted to call Sarah and demand an explanation, but another part was too hurt and afraid of what she might say. The sister I thought I knew would never treat me this way. 3 days passed without a word from Sarah. No thank you for the expensive gifts I'd brought, no acknowledgement of my presence at her wedding, no explanation for the humiliating seating arrangement. The silence was deafening and spoke volumes about how little I apparently meant to her new life. On Thursday morning, my phone finally rang. Sarah's name appeared on the screen, and my heart leaped with hope that she was calling to apologize and explain everything. Maybe there had been some terrible misunderstanding that we could work through together. Maybe my sister was still in there somewhere beneath the coldness. "Emma." Sarah's voice was crisp and businesslike, lacking any warmth or affection. "I'm calling because Michael and I need to discuss something important with you. Can you meet us for lunch today? There are some things we need to clear up about the wedding and moving forward." Moving forward? What did that even mean? I agreed to meet them at a restaurant downtown, hoping against hope that Sarah would finally explain her behavior and we could repair our relationship. Maybe the stress of wedding planning had made her act strangely, and now she wanted to make things right. I arrived at the restaurant early, my stomach in knots with anxiety and hope. When Sarah and Michael walked in, they looked like a perfect couple, well-dressed, confident, completely united. But there was something cold in their expressions that made my blood run cold with anticipation of bad news. "Emma," Sarah said as they sat across from me, "we need to talk about boundaries and expectations going forward in our marriage." Michael nodded approvingly beside her, his arm possessively around her shoulders. The formal tone made me feel like I was in a business meeting rather than talking to family. "I don't understand," I said cautiously, my heart already sinking. "What kind of boundaries? We're sisters, Sarah. We've always been close. What's changed? But even as I asked, I knew something fundamental had shifted between us, and it might be irreparable and devastating. Sarah exchanged a look with Michael before continuing. Michael feels that my relationship with my family has been too involved, too dependent. He thinks it's unhealthy for a married woman to be so close to her sister and parents. We need to create some space for our marriage to thrive. Too involved? Too dependent? I stared at her in shock. Sarah, I've never interfered in your relationship. I've been supportive of your choices, even when I had concerns about Michael. How is loving you and wanting to be part of your life considered too involved or unhealthy? Michael spoke for the first time, his voice cold and calculating. Emma, you have to understand that Sarah's primary loyalty is to me now. We're building a life together, and that means putting our marriage first. Family relationships need to take a back seat to our partnership and our future together. A back seat? I repeated, feeling like I was in a nightmare. Sarah, is this really how you feel? Do you really want to cut off your family for him? My voice cracked with desperation as I searched her face for any sign of the sister I'd grown up with. Sarah's expression remained cold and resolute. Emma, it's not about cutting anyone off. It's about priorities and healthy boundaries. Michael is my husband now, and our marriage comes first. You need to respect that and give us the space we need to build our life together. Space from what exactly? I asked, my voice rising slightly with frustration and hurt. From family dinners? From phone calls? From being sisters? What kind of space are you talking about, Sarah? The restaurant suddenly felt suffocating as other diners glanced our way curiously. We think it's best if we limit contact for now, Sarah said matter-of-factly, as if she were discussing the weather rather than destroying our lifelong relationship. Maybe occasional texts on birthdays and holidays, but no more weekly calls. No more drop-in visits, no more constant involvement in each other's lives. The words hit me like physical blows. Occasional texts on birthdays? This from the sister who used to call me every day, who shared every detail of her life with me, who had been my best friend for 28 years? I felt like I was watching a stranger wearing Sarah's face. Sarah, please, I begged, tears starting to form in my eyes. Don't do this. Don't let him come between us. We're sisters. We've been through everything together. Don't throw away our relationship because he's jealous of our bond and wants to control who you love. Michael's face darkened with anger at my words.
Emma, you're being dramatic and manipulative. This isn't about jealousy or control. This is about Sarah growing up and learning to put her marriage first, like any mature adult would do.
Stop trying to guilt her into prioritizing you over her husband. I'm not asking her to prioritize me over you, I said desperately. I'm asking her not to abandon her family completely. There's room in her life for both a marriage and a sister. Love isn't a zero-sum game where choosing one means destroying the other. Sarah's expression softened slightly, and for a moment I saw a flicker of the sister I knew. But then Michael squeezed her hand, and the coldness returned to her eyes. Emma, this is what's best for everyone. You'll understand someday when you're married and have to make the same choices. No, Sarah, I said firmly, standing up from the table. I won't understand. because I would never abandon my family for anyone. Love multiplies, it doesn't divide. What you're doing isn't mature or healthy. It's cruel and wrong, and deep down you know it. I left the restaurant feeling completely shattered. In the span of 1 week, I'd lost my sister twice. First, a public humiliation at her wedding, and now to a deliberate choice to cut me out of her life. The sister I'd loved unconditionally had chosen a man who demanded she abandon her family. For months, I tried to process what had happened. I replayed every conversation, every interaction, searching for signs I'd missed. Had Michael always been this controlling? Had Sarah always been this willing to abandon family for approval? The questions haunted me day and night without answers. I threw myself into work, spending long hours at the office to avoid going home to my empty apartment, where everything reminded me of Sarah. My friends tried to console me, but how do you explain that your own sister chose to erase you from her life? 6 months passed without any contact from Sarah. No birthday card, no Christmas text, no acknowledgement that I existed. The silence was deafening and confirmed that her decision to cut me off hadn't been a temporary reaction to wedding stress. It was a permanent choice. Then one day, something unexpected happened that would change everything. I was cleaning out my grandmother's old jewelry box when I found a hidden compartment I'd never noticed before. Inside was a small key and a note in my grandmother's handwriting that would reveal a secret that changed everything. The note was brief but shocking. Emma, if you're reading this, use this key for the safety deposit box at First National Bank. Box 247. What's inside belongs to you and Sarah equally, but only give her half if she treats you with love and respect. Grandma knew people's true nature. My hands trembling, I drove to the bank with the key and my grandmother's death certificate. The safety deposit box contained documents, stock certificates, and property deeds worth over $2 million. My grandmother had been secretly wealthy, and she'd left very specific instructions about how her fortune should be distributed. According to the will I found in the box, the inheritance was meant to be split equally between Sarah and me, but only if we maintained a loving sisterly relationship. If either of us treated the other cruelly or cut off contact without just cause, the wronged sister would inherit everything. My grandmother had been wise enough to know that money could reveal people's true character. She'd structured her will to reward love and punish greed or cruelty. Sarah's decision to abandon me for Michael had just cost her over $1 million, though she had no idea yet. The lawyer I consulted confirmed that the will was ironclad and legally binding. Sarah's treatment of me at the wedding and her subsequent decision to cut off contact clearly violated the conditions of the inheritance. The entire fortune now belonged to me, and there was nothing Sarah could do about it. I decided not to tell Sarah immediately about the inheritance. Instead, I wanted to see if she would reach out to me on her own, if she would realize the mistake she'd made in choosing Michael's demands over our sisterly bond. Months passed, and still nothing. A year after the wedding, I received an unexpected phone call from my mother. "Emma," she said urgently, "Sarah and Michael are in serious financial trouble. They bought a house they couldn't afford, and Michael lost his job. They're facing foreclosure and are asking family for help." "Let me guess," I said calmly. "Now they want to rebuild family relationships because they need money." My mother's silence confirmed my suspicion. Suddenly, family wasn't so unimportant when they needed financial support from the people they'd pushed away for the sake of their marriage. She asked me to call you, Mom continued uncomfortably. She's too proud to reach out directly, but she's wondering if you might be willing to help them through this difficult time. They need about $50,000 to avoid losing their house and starting over completely. $50,000. A year ago, I might have emptied my savings to help my sister, without question. But now, with over $2 million sitting in my bank account and the memory of how she'd treated me still fresh, I felt no obligation to rescue her from consequences. Mom, I said carefully, has Sarah acknowledged how she treated me at her wedding? Has she apologized for cutting me out of her life because her husband demanded it? Has she shown any remorse for choosing his controlling behavior over our family relationships? The silence on the other end of the line told me everything I needed to know. Sarah wanted financial help, but she wasn't willing to admit she'd been wrong or take responsibility for the pain she'd caused. She wanted the benefits of family without the obligations of love and respect. She says, "The past is the past," Mom finally replied. She's hoping you can move forward and help her family in their time of need. She's your sister, Emma. Despite everything that happened, she's still your sister and she needs your help right now. You're right, Mom, I said calmly. She is my sister. And if she had treated me like a sister instead of an embarrassment to be hidden away, I might feel differently about helping her now. But she made her choice very clear when she chose Michael's demands over family. That evening, I received a text from Sarah, the first direct contact in over a year. Emma, I know we haven't talked in a while, but I'm hoping we can put the past behind us. Michael and I are going through a really tough time, financially, and I could really use my sister's support right now. I stared at the text for a long time before responding. Sarah, a year ago you told me your marriage required cutting off family relationships. You chose Michael's controlling demands over our sisterhood. Now that you need something from family, suddenly relationships matter again? That's not how love works. Her response came quickly. Emma, please don't be petty. I'm asking for help as your sister. We all make mistakes, and I'm hoping you can be the bigger person here. Michael and I are about to lose everything, and family should help family in times of crisis. Petty? Asking for acknowledgement of the pain she'd caused was petty. Wanting an apology for being humiliated at her wedding and then cut off from her life was being small-minded. Her complete lack of awareness about her own behavior was stunning and infuriating. I decided it was time to reveal the inheritance, not to help her, but to show her exactly what her choices had cost her in ways she couldn't have imagined. Some lessons can only be learned through consequences, and Sarah was about to learn a very expensive one about family loyalty. Sarah, I texted back, before we discuss helping you, there's something you need to know about Grandma's inheritance. You might want to sit down for this, because it's going to change how you view everything that's happened between us over the past year. My phone rang immediately. What inheritance? Sarah's voice was breathless with sudden hope. Grandma didn't have any money. She lived in that tiny apartment and drove that old car. What are you talking about, Emma? What inheritance could there possibly be? Grandma was secretly wealthy, Sarah. She left over $2 million in stocks, properties, and investments. The inheritance was supposed to be split equally between us, but only if we maintained a loving, sisterly relationship. Your decision to cut me off disqualified you from receiving anything. The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. When Sarah finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. $2 million? Emma, you can't be serious. Grandma had $2 million and never said anything to us. She wanted to see how we'd treat each other without the influence of money. I explained. She was wise enough to know that wealth reveals character. She structured the will to reward love and punish cruelty. Your treatment of me cost you over $1 million, Sarah. But I didn't know, Sarah cried desperately. If I had known about the money, I never would have. Emma, you have to understand, I didn't know there were financial consequences for my choices. This changes everything. We can fix this, right? We can repair our relationship now. So you're saying that if there had been money involved, you would have treated me differently? I asked coldly. You would have maintained our relationship for financial gain rather than love? That's exactly why Grandma structured the will this way, Sarah. She wanted to see your true character. Sarah's voice became frantic and desperate. Emma, please. I made mistakes, okay? I let Michael influence me too much. I was wrong to exclude you from the wedding and wrong to cut off contact. I'm sorry. Can't we move past this? Can't you help us now? Where was this apology a year ago when I begged you not to abandon our relationship? I asked. Where was this remorse when you told me family needed to take a back seat to your marriage? You're only sorry now because you've discovered there were financial consequences for your choices. Emma, please, Sarah sobbed into the phone. Michael lost his job because of the economy, not because of anything we did wrong. We're about to lose our house, our credit is ruined, I'm pregnant now, and we have nowhere to go. Don't you care about your niece or nephew? Pregnant? This was the first I'd heard about a baby. Sarah was having a child and hadn't bothered to tell her own sister. Yet now she expected me to care about the baby's welfare when it was convenient for her financial situation. Congratulations on the pregnancy. I said sincerely, I hope you and the baby are healthy. But Sarah, you excluded me from your wedding, cut me out of your life, and didn't even tell me you were pregnant. You can't suddenly claim family loyalty when you need something. I was wrong, she screamed through her tears. I admit it, I was completely wrong about everything. Michael was controlling and manipulative, and I should have listened to you. Please, Emma, I'm begging you, help us save our house. I'll do anything to make this right. If Michael was so controlling and manipulative, I asked carefully, why are you still with him? If you've realized he was wrong to make you choose between family and marriage, what has changed in your relationship? Are you asking for help to continue enabling his behavior? Sarah's silence told me everything I needed to know. She was still with Michael, still under his influence, but now desperate enough to temporarily set aside his demands because they needed money. Nothing fundamental had changed except their financial circumstances and her knowledge of the inheritance she'd lost. Sarah, I said firmly, I'm not going to rescue you from the consequences of choices you made freely. You chose Michael's controlling behavior over family relationships. You chose to humiliate me at your wedding and cut me out of your life. Actions have consequences, and this is yours. But the baby, Emma, think about the baby. Are you really going to let your innocent niece or nephew suffer because you're angry with me? This child didn't do anything wrong. Please don't punish an innocent baby for my mistakes. I'm begging you as your sister. I'm not punishing anyone, Sarah, I replied calmly. I'm simply not rescuing adults from the natural consequences of their own choices. You and Michael created this situation through your decisions. You have family members you could have maintained relationships with, but you chose to burn those bridges for his approval. The call ended with Sarah sobbing and pleading, but I remained firm. Some lessons can only be learned through experiencing the full weight of our choices. Sarah had chosen Michael's controlling demands over family loyalty, and now she was learning the true cost of that decision in ways she never anticipated. 2 weeks later, I heard through my mother that Sarah and Michael had lost their house to foreclosure. They were now living in a small apartment, struggling to make ends meet, and arguing constantly about money and blame. Their marriage was cracking under the pressure of financial stress and mutual resentment. I felt no satisfaction in their struggles, but I also felt no obligation to rescue them. Sarah had made her choices with full knowledge of the pain they would cause me. The fact that she hadn't anticipated all the consequences didn't change the fundamental cruelty of her actions. 6 months later, my mother called with surprising news. Emma, Sarah, and Michael are getting divorced. She finally realized how manipulative and controlling he was. She's asking if there's any way to repair your relationship now that she's leaving him and admits she was completely wrong. Is she asking to repair our relationship? I responded carefully. Or is she asking about the inheritance now that she's meeting the conditions again by leaving her controlling husband? I need to know if this is about love or money, because the distinction matters to me. Mom sighed deeply. I think it's both, honestly. She misses you terribly and regrets everything that happened, but she's also struggling financially as a single mother. She's hoping that repairing your relationship might also help with her situation. She's desperate, Emma. I thought carefully about my response. Sarah was finally making the right choice by leaving Michael, but her timing and motivations were still questionable. Was she leaving him because she'd realized he was wrong, or because their financial crisis had made his controlling behavior a luxury she could no longer afford? Mom, I said finally, tell Sarah that I'm willing to meet with her if she can honestly answer one question. Is she leaving Michael because she's realized he was wrong to make her choose between family and marriage, or because their financial problems have made his demands inconvenient? The question was meant to test Sarah's sincerity. If she was truly repentant about her choices and genuinely wanted to repair our relationship, she would understand why her motivations mattered. If she was only motivated by money and desperation, her answer would reveal that truth. A week later, Sarah appeared at my apartment door unannounced, looking tired and defeated, but somehow more like the sister I remembered. She was visibly pregnant now, probably 6 months along, and her face showed the strain of everything she'd been through over the past 2 years. Emma, she said quietly, I came to answer your question in person because you deserve honesty and I owe you the truth. I'm leaving Michael because I realized he was wrong about everything, not because of our financial problems. I should have never let him come between us. I studied her face carefully, looking for signs of deception or desperation that might indicate she was saying what she thought I wanted to hear. But what I saw was genuine remorse and the sister I'd grown up with, finally free from the influence that had changed her so dramatically. Sarah, I said softly, opening my door wider. Come in. Let's talk about everything that happened and see if we can find our way back to being sisters again. But I need you to understand that rebuilding trust takes time, and I need to see consistent actions, not just words. Did you like my story of standing up to family betrayal? Let me know in the comments where you're listening from, and if you've ever had to set boundaries with family members who took your love for granted. Give this video a thumbs up and subscribe for more stories about finding strength in difficult situations.